And we're live. Hey, folks, welcome
Hey,
to Soaring Profits for another one of our Thursday live interviews. Tonight's a little bit different for us. We have I guess it would be my right. We'll go to the left, right? It's all backwards on me. To my right, we have our lovely guest this evening, someone who I've known for a very long time, a dear friend of mine, Shannon. Say hi, Shannon.
Hello.
Look at that. And then to our left, we have the second part of the dynamic duo here, James. And where are
hey.
you now? Looks like you're off.
So I have decided to give up on everything, and I have left, and now I'm off grid. No, so I'm on this great tour. I'm part of this camping group that's called Camping Canada for Singles, not singles you're alone, but singles that you don't have anyone to camp with, so you get a group together and camp. So I created this tour, and it's called Wilderness. Well, I didn't create it, but I started it. It's Wilderness Tours in Ottawa, or just outside Ottawa. And what you do is you're here for 3 days at a resort, and you go whitewater rafting
Easy for you to
for a day. Easy for me to say. And the other times you drink a lot and do like really fun things. But anyway, it's beautiful here. I highly recommend it. There's down there. There's a beautiful long beach where you can like supboard, kayak, do whatever you want. Here are the low income apartments behind me. Over here is I don't know if you can see it way back there, the camping section. And then way far away from me, where the rich people are these like beautiful cottages. They're quite big and lovely. And there's a wonderful like bar, restaurant, kind of enjoyable spot that everyone gets to go and hang out. And apparently you can dance and stuff later that I'm going to enjoy later after this podcast, probably till the wee hours of the morning. And then tomorrow morning I go on the water and try not to drown. So, and I rented a GoPro. I got an hour of GoPro, so you guys are going to see all this. I'm pretty excited.
Rented a GoPro.
Yeah, I rented a GoPro that goes on my helmet. Yeah.
So what? The whitewater rafting where you're going, what is that, like the Ottawa River you do, or what is that?
I believe it's the Ottawa River, and it's all rapids, and I guess there's sections that are calm, and then they get really kind of turbulent. And I don't know a lot yet because I haven't gone through the session, but yeah, that's basically it. There's 8 of us in a boat, all paddling, trying not to die, over and over again. I'm pretty excited about it.
Have you done it before?
Never. So I have a bucket list of things I want to do, like jump out of a plane and bungee jump and all this stuff. And this is one of them. So I got it off my list. So I'm like into like self-change. Like, you don't know a lot about me, Shannon, but I have changed a lot over the last 6 years. The profiteers out there all know because I talk about it all the time. But I've lost 150 pounds, and I have kind of changed my life, my heart, body, and soul. And now I'm just, because I'm so much thinner and I'm so much more active, I'm a runner and stuff. Now I'm trying all these things that I always wanted to try. And yeah, so this is next on my adventure. I can't wait. This morning I was swimming in falls.
Yeah. You were what, sorry?
Swimming in the falls, like Egan Shoots, it's called. It's beautiful out there. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Shannon, obviously, thank you so much for joining us this fine evening. It's more like afternoon for you, I guess. It's with the time change. I think that's awesome. I'm so glad you're able to do this. You're somebody that I've wanted to have on here for a long time. You and I, we've known each other for a very long time. You're from this area. You decided to leave, head out west, and you kind of chased your professional dreams. And then you've kind of taken on this entrepreneurial side of yourself as well. Why don't you give us like a little, the elevator pitch of kind of what you've done in regards to the entrepreneurial side, and what kind of sparked that for you?
Well, first, I'm honored that you would even want me on your podcast.
Yeah.
As I told you before, I have low expectations.
No expectations, but I know you're going to do fantastic. So
yeah.
So I started with a company called Beauty Counter. It's just like a little, it's not little, I shouldn't call it little. It's not little at all. It is a company that's out of Santa Monica, and they focus on clean beauty or clean body care. And I kind of got into it initially when I started to learn a little bit more about the beauty industry and how it's unregulated. Or it's not unregulated, but it's not well regulated, and how there's actual horrible ingredients in our products. I just wanted to make the switch. So I wanted to make the switch that I was using more clean products from my health. And I actually broke my foot 3 years ago now. It was in January. I broke my foot.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the story behind that, we won't talk about how. But I broke my foot.
I think I want to know.
Right.
It was a New Year's Eve escapade. We'll just leave it at that. I was wearing way too high of heels in cobblestone, and it was not good. So anybody who knows me well knows I actually can't really stay still. So when I was sitting on the couch, I messaged a friend that I used to work with, and I said, hey, I really want to switch all my products. I want to use your Beautycounter stuff. And she said, well, why don't you join? And I'm sitting there with my foot propped up in an air cast, and I'm like, I'm not really doing anything right now. Sure. And it was easy. I already looked into the company. I already really loved what the company stood for. I already loved the ingredients that they were using. So for me, it was just kind of you know what, why not? We'll see what happens. And that's my story and my journey into how I started with it. Can I talk a little bit about why I wanted to change to clean beauty?
You talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I'm you guys know, I think I'm a pediatric emergency nurse. But I've been working peds for 13 years. So I've been an RN for that long. Yes, Pat, I'm old. So what I started to notice was really just that children were getting sicker and earlier. And I was seeing these things that I never have really seen before. So things like cancer and diabetes in children that were as young as 18 months. Children that were getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which we always, and I learned was an adult onset diabetes, is now no longer the case. Children get type 1 diabetes. Autism, which I had never seen in my early career, now seeing, I think the stats are like 1 in 5 children potentially could have autism. So I was starting to see this incline of like kids just getting sicker earlier. And I always wondered, James, probably you can relate to this, but like, why are we getting sicker as a population who's really so advanced and have all this knowledge? Why are we getting sicker earlier? So my brain, my wheels start turning, and I obviously always thought the environment had something to do with it, but I thought that meant our water, our air, the things around us. I didn't really, and also the things that we put into our body, our food, but I never really put a lot of thought into the things that we put on our body and how that can affect our health. So when I started to like dig into that a little bit, I really realized like there are so many things in our products that are linked to autism, obesity, diabetes. Like it's crazy once you start actually doing the research and the digging. The products and the chemicals that are in our products are linked to all these crazy kind of diseases. And when I learned that, you can't unlearn it. You're just like, once you know it, you're like, how do we not all know this? And now what can I do about it? That's where my brain goes. And so, yes, I started with the company as a more for myself because I wanted to make the switch for myself. But once I started to learn more about the company and the mission behind the company, I was like, okay, not only am I doing this for myself, but I can do this for other people. I can help other people make that switch and learn this as well.
Right.
So
yeah,
I might have rambled there.
You mentioned children. The children were your main reason for doing this. Is it does your company do children products like soaps and stuff like that? Like,
yeah, so they used to,
right?
And unfortunately stopped doing children's products. I think just because they were having a hard time selling them because they are clean and they do like third party testing and all these other things. Their products are not cheap per se. And so I think they were just having a hard time selling kids products where women predominantly do a lot of the buying for themselves or their household. So I think that they just had a hard time with the the margin, the sales margin, and I don't think that they were making enough money to actually, I think that from what they told the field, they were like breaking even or losing money with that line and our men's line, unfortunately. So they stopped.
I think exactly like you were saying though, Shannon, is that if you're in a situation where the matriarch, the woman of the family, is buying these products, she's using them. These children that are in vitro are absorbing these products, right? Where these issues that are coming up that become so problematic, right? You talked a little bit about type 1 diabetes being like that. You're seeing a lot of that in children. How? What are we switching? How is that coming to be in children now? Like that, like you say, that's something that I grew up with, is that's because you're eating too much McDonald's. You are
right. Too much sugar. Yeah.
Well, you nailed it. And that's it. It's again, this is the part that's like so interesting to me, because I think that we're a really educated, generation now. It's poor diet predominantly. A lot of these children are obese and don't eat well. So then unfortunately they end up getting type 1 diabetes. And you mentioned like in vitro. It's interesting because some of the studies, there's a really good book that if anybody is actually interested in this, it's called Sicker Fatter. I have it right here. It's called Sicker Fatter Poorer. It's a really, really good book that just kind of dives a little bit deeper into endocrine disruptors, which are so if anybody's interested in actually diving deeper into it and how it's linked to things, like, it's from a pediatrician out of New York. He wrote this, and he's actually on Beauty Counter's board of scientists. So I kind of got introduced to this book through him, but it's really interesting when you start doing the research, and actually the research is out there. That's why I think it's so frustrating that these things are still in our product. When you do the research, you actually find out that this is generational. So it could affect me and my health, but it could affect my children, and in fact their children going forward. So some of these products are bioaccumulative, or they just keep going, like, they keep building up in your body, and then they get passed down from generation to generation. As I think we know that it's as high as like your third or fourth generation, which is really fascinating to me.
Wow.
So
from myself watching you over the last number of years you've been doing this, one of the things that I've noticed is that you've built a social media presence. I think you're hilarious, right? Like the stuff that you do a lot of like really cool, fun stuff. You're doing giveaways all the time like that. But then you also have kind of like a social advocacy angle on what you're doing as well. Like you'll talk about US regulations, the things that are in, I don't know, is this creepy that I know that you do this stuff? Like I feel like I've monitored this over the years. But no, like you've got, these lists of chemicals that the US federal government, for instance, has in their products that are problematic. And then you have the Canadian list, boom, 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 that have less or have they've advocated to have these removed. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And is that something that, like, when you chose Beauty Counter to work with, that obviously just fell in line with what you were looking to do and what your career path, but what are they doing next? Like, what's their advocacy? What's the next move for that type of thing as well?
Yeah, so I think for me, being like that, I am a nurse and I've taught nursing for so long, it's just ingrained in me to be an educator, if that makes sense. So that's why I kind of work that into my posts, and when I talk about it with people, because to me, it's like education, knowledge is power. If you know, you'll do better. But you can't do better if you don't know and you don't have that knowledge. So that's the biggest piece there for me, is just like, I love teaching people. You're not going to make a switch just because I'm like, here, buy this cream. It's going to, make you look better. Yeah. But what if I tell you that the cream that you're using is actually linked to skin cancer because of the ingredients that are in it? Then you're going to choose a better cream, whether that's Beauty Counter or not. That doesn't matter to me as much as you're making the switch for you and your health and your family's health. So when I actually only run my company on social media, and I wouldn't say I'm at all like a social media guru, but that is how I've just decided to run my company, because I do work full time, and it works. And it works for me. So, and I can do it from anywhere, which I love. So yeah, that's kind of why I did that. And so with Beautycounter, I think this is really why I stayed with this company, because you can join any company and be a consultant for any company and sell any product, right? But at the end of the day, Beautycounter is, for me, a different network marketing kind of company because of their advocacy work that they do. So they actually send consultants to Washington, D.C., and they sent them to Parliament and to actually meet with lawmakers to urge them to make changes. So we just did that in Canada, and they just did that in DC, which is really, really cool. So cool that you actually have the opportunity to be a part of that. And then you're doing that on things like your platform and when you speak to people as well. But what I love is that Beautycounter has helped change actual laws. Like, we have actually changed, I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's up to 9 different laws now. And so it seems crazy, but in the States, and of course we're different, but we are not that much, we aren't that much better. That's not really great grammar, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, we have our faults, right? Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like in the States, they ban 11 chemicals. I think that's gone up now to 30 chemicals. The EU bans something around 1,400. We are around the 500, 600 mark in Canada. And so, you know, when you think about the EU banning 14, so I think it's 14 to 15,000 different chemicals, like, why are we only at 600 in Canada?
Right.
So that's the piece that I really like, the advocacy work. We need to be better. We need to do better. Like, there's over, I don't even know how many chemicals are on the market, but I do know that there's millions, I think.
Right, absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands. Yeah. So when you think about the harmful ingredients, so Beautycounter bans 1,800 of these harmful or questionable ingredients. And so I just love that. And I love that we're working to make sure that not just Beautycounter is clean. We think every company should be clean and not using these harmful, like, why would you use ingredients in your products that are known to cause cancer? It makes no sense.
Right.
And all for profit.
Absolutely. Well, and that's where I think, you know, it's been interesting watching, and you and I have talked, because I've reached out to you privately before about opportunities for my daughter, because what you do, I think that it's a fantastic model, and it's something that I think that you do well. I think you manage it well. Your posts are fantastic. They're educational. They're interesting. And I see my daughter as someone who, as she grows and develops, I think she could do something along that line very well. She's very outspoken. She's dynamic. She's kind of personable too. Maybe a little bit like you, right? She's kind of fun. But it's one of those things that I think there's a fantastic, first of all, business model. In this kind of relationship between James and I'm kind of like the finance guy. I talk the money. I talk about how to make money, business, stuff like that. And what are you
trying to make a light happen? Sorry,
Blair, which project? But yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. So obviously nursing is an important part of your life. That's kind of the day job. And you and I have had some great conversations over the last little while about what that was like, and nursing through a pandemic and dealing with all of that. And your clientele is the most vulnerable. And what during COVID, during all of that, the last couple of years, I'm sure your job's been very difficult. Has that been something that's weighing on you personally? How do you deal with that? Is there
well, a lot of wine, unfortunately.
I love it. I love it.
I think that might be how
everything at work. Sometimes, I'm not kidding you. I'll go to the nursing station. I'll be like, "This is why I drink. This is why I drink. This is why. This is why." Yes. So yeah, no, it's obviously been challenging. I don't think that COVID itself was the reason it was necessarily challenging. We were not hit with COVID per se. Like, kids got COVID. At first they didn't, right? Remember? I don't know if you remember that, but at the very beginning they didn't get it. Right. They were, we didn't know why, but kids weren't getting it. And we thought, you know, there was all these theories as to why children weren't able to get COVID. But after the second wave, I think it was, they started to get it. but our kids weren't sick with COVID. So it's been challenging, but I think it's been challenging in our profession and in our ward more or less because of the policies that were put into place, not necessarily because of COVID. And I think the blame has always been COVID. And yes, the COVID was the reason that these policies were put into place that kind of screwed us in the end, but it wasn't COVID. And I think I'm so sick and tired of hearing people being like, COVID is the reason. Like, no, it's not, you know, it's a piece of the puzzle. I think the healthcare system has been on fire for some time. It's almost like it was like smoldering coals and now it's literally like a blazing fire. But it's been like that for a long time. We've been at capacity for a long time. We've been short staffed for a long time. And then what happened, in my opinion, I might go off here.
I love it.
I like it.
Getting canceled.
I might get canceled. Yeah. I think what happened was whomever was in charge of this, our government, our health authorities, whatever it was, they ended up taking registered nurses and pulling them from acute care, or allowing them to move from acute care to go into like swabbing and vaccination centers. So all of a sudden we've lost all these trained, experienced acute care workers into a swabbing center, which I'm sorry
is not tricky.
Yeah, well, considering that now we're all doing it ourselves now, so I'm pretty sure it's not that difficult.
I would say like a monkey could do it, right? Like I don't know if I should say it, but
well, Pat does it. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Pat's able to do it, so there's proof.
So there you go. Like I just think that we should have done things differently. We should have maybe asked nursing students to do vaccinations, and at a way cheaper rate that we paid RNs to do so. We could have had retired nurses come back and do swabbing or vaccinations. Like there were so many things that we could have, should have done. And these were things that were coming up in my brain, like in the moment. I mean, you know, hindsight is 2020, but these are rocket science. Like, you know what I mean? It's common sense, in my opinion. We should have been pulling people to do these things, but instead we pulled all these acute care nurses. In our department alone, which is a very small department, we aren't staffed with a lot of nurses. We have 10 on day staff. We lost 36 nurses in 1 year. I think it was actually like 6 to 8 months. We lost 36 nurses. Most of them went to swabbing or vaccinations, or just left altogether because they were just fed up with, you know, the shit.
No, and that's it's funny. So my mother was an RN. When COVID first kicked off, when we didn't know anything about COVID, her, you know, she gets the spidey senses kick up, right? She's like, okay, well, I'm concerned about this. She went through SARS. So my mother worked at Scarborough General Hospital, which was the hotbed of SARS. She lived it, was there for the months long, you know. I'm not going to call it a pandemic that we had here in Canada, but you know, the endemic that we had here in Canada, right? And she was very concerned that that's what this is going to look like. We're going to do our 2 weeks and we're going to move on from it. And here we are 2 years later, and very similarly, we are executing very similar policies. The hospitals are still remain on like some sort of lockdown type scenario for visitation. As you know, Shannon, my father passed away here just before Christmas. And my uncle 6 months before that, none COVID related whatsoever. But being in hospitals in Ontario, and I'll speak for Ontario, was a nightmare, was an absolute nightmare. And because I know you personally and I know how you handle certain situations, I wish I would have had someone like you dealing with this, because we had nurses that for the first time in their life had a feeling of major authority and power trip, and they were separating families. They were keeping people away from their loved ones in their final hours. It became a very, you know, weird process we were going through, and the whole world is calling them heroes. And I'm like, I've got a big divide here from what I would call heroes and what this feels like when you're being told that you can't go visit your family member because they're dying. And I've watched our healthcare system here in Ontario to a point where it's unrecognizable from even when and I'm not an old man. Well, you're a little bit older than I am, but it's unrecognizable. You go in for, here in our area especially, we don't have family doctors, right? We have like 35,000 people in this community that don't have a primary care physician. Of 100,000, that's a 35%. That's unheard of. That's wild.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we have a lot of nurses decided to retire, just like I imagine everywhere. And yeah, I know you can't see me, but that's
shadow.
Okay. I'm being attacked by mosquitoes too. It's because I love you, profiteers. I'm doing this for you. No, and a lot of retired because some of them were afraid of what it would look like. And then we had the government say you can't work if you don't have the vaccine, which did not help. So now, so I have my godson's girlfriend who he's marrying in September. She talks about how some of the healthcare places are actually shutting down because they don't have enough nurses to staff right now, which is like ridiculous. If bring back the nurses that you laid off, that would be great, or there's got to be something else you can do. But I personally disagree with Pat. I think nurses are heroes. I don't care the reason. I know you can't see me now. This is great.
Yeah,
it's like good. I'm in witness protection.
Right. Yeah.
So no, I personally think even before COVID, nurses were heroes. I think that they do a hell of a job. They do more than doctors do, as far as I'm concerned. Now, doctors do their own, do a great job too. But I think nurses are the front lines. My mom was a nurse. They work very hard. They're like worked off their feet because they don't have enough staff to do what they're asked to do. And they're often asked to do more even after their shift's done. And I just think it's amazing. So to say they're not heroes, Pat, I think I disagree with you. But I get what you're getting at, that to say that they were heroes during that COVID time, when you're frustrated that, someone you love is dying and the wall that's in between you and I think it's ridiculous when your loved one is dying that you would keep any family member out. That is just silly.
Yeah.
You just can't handle that I'm in Dolphins, can you?
Yeah, and I think we have to remember, I think we have to remember, these nurses were put in a tricky situation. So, yeah, there were a lot of times where I know that they were talking about the vaccine policy where I work, and I'm like, how will this work with children? If a parent is unvaccinated and the child, we can't say to the parent that they can't come in. So when this was this was a question of how will this pan out, I straight up said to our management, I said, I am sorry, I will not be complying with that. I will absolutely not be checking people's vaccine passport. That is not my job. That is not our job. And here, the government and whoever else made it our job. Like, there's so many other things that we have to worry about. We don't have to worry about the fact that you're wearing your mask and or have a vaccine, or I don't know. There's so many things, including no visitors, one visitor, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That was never our job. And they made
enough to
it.
Do. Yeah.
And we always have had enough to do. Like, we for sure are stretched thin. And then they added this on top of it. So I think that was part of why a lot of people left. They were sick of the policies that were put into place because of COVID. Again, not because of COVID, I don't think. For majority of people, ICU might be different. I can't speak to that. But we all of a sudden, I used to say, I'm like, you know what? I'm so sick and tired of being a mask police. I am not a mask police. Right. That's not my job.
Yeah.
No. I got reamed out and called a racist because I didn't give somebody a mask. I was a triage nurse. I am looking to see if your kid is breathing or dying or not. My job was also to switch your masks. And this one person was already wearing a surgical mask. So it just didn't register. Well, she comes up to the window and claims that I'm racist because I didn't give her a mask. I'm like, you can have a mask. Just use your words, is what I said to her. Use your words. You're an adult. So again, I don't want to say it was the nurse's fault that people were unable to. We were just honestly, we're the messengers, unfortunately, and we're the people that get the brunt of everything. If you're pissed off with the service that you're getting, or you're pissed off that you can't go in to see your dad, it's our fault, even if it's not, you know? And so again, another emotional and stressor that we have kind of just been, that has been put on us, that I think is overlooked. But of course, there's a couple people that just, they do take it too far. They have an ego. They kind of just roll with it. But yeah, I think it's just shitty all around. I think that they put us in a really shitty position for a lot of things that should have just never been the case.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. It's unfortunate. And again, looking at it through my experience is that I had, like I say, is that I don't think I ever blamed the nurses. Like you started this conversation is that this was a policy issue. The problem that I found is that I would go into the hospital, PRHC in the area here, and I'd walk in, and I was there every day because my father was dying. Like we're in palliative, and I would get grilled every day, and it'd be the same people, and they would have to make the same phone call. And it's like, we did this yesterday, and I'm coming here for like an hour because I work full time and I've got my daughter full time and I've got all these things. So I'm here for an hour, and you're going to take 35 minutes to check to make sure that I'm okay to go today. And I'm like, no, I get it, but it's the same thing we did yesterday, and it's the same thing we're going to do tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And I'm not special, right? I'm not asking for people to recognize me like that. But when I'm on a first name basis with Janet, when I walk in, like, what's going on here, guys? Like, I just never got it. And that was my big problem with COVID. And I know, so when you had a vaccination issue with your coworkers, I know that there was a lot of nurses that talked about potentially leaving the field because they had some questions and concerns. Was that something that some of the nurses around you had those kind of feelings, some concerns about vaccination hesitancy and that sort of deal? Was there anything that you ran into that way?
It's really funny because if you ask people now, they would, like, of course, say no, they've always wanted to get it or whatever. But when we had conversations prior to a vaccine even being available or made, we had these conversations in the nursing room. We were like, if they made a vaccine and they were like wanting to trial it, would you guys do it? We had these conversations, right? And majority said no, absolutely not. Yeah. And yet majority absolutely did. Right. So I don't know. It was really, really kind of a fascinating thing to me. But what I think they didn't realize, and what I think a lot of people don't realize, is like it was still a trial, even though it went through some trials. We don't know long-term side effects. We don't even really know short-term side effects at this point when nurses were first getting it.
Yeah, because you guys were getting it immediately, right? Like as soon as they rolled out, it was awesome, right? Okay.
Right. And of course it was voluntary at first. And so, it was interesting. There wasn't a lot of hesitancy. I think people wanted it, but I think people wanted it to just get on with their lives. I think that the general consensus for people was that if we get this, we can move on with the life. Right. And that has not been the case. Me and how my brain works. I had to dig a little deeper. I wasn't gonna just go for it. I just needed to dig a little deeper, and I needed to do my own research. And I think that's the thing that irks me so much is when people are like, "Oh, you did your Google research." Like, fuck off. I did my research. I know how to do research. I took stats in school. I'm a registered. I know how to read journals. And so I did that. And I think that it was really frustrating when people were saying that, like, oh, you did your Google research. And you're like, oh, you're doing your own research. Listen to the doctor. Well, like, you're okay to do your own research, right? I empower people to do that. I encourage people to do that. I think that regardless of whether you have a degree in medicine or not, you should always do your own research. And yes, there's a lot of shit out there, but you should do credible, good research for everything that you choose to put on or in your body.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It seems like, yourself, and especially around the timeline, you're talking 3 years ago when you started with Beauty Counter, and you've went down this journey for yourself about advocating for what you think is proper for yourself, for your body, for your overall wellness. And then all of a sudden, as you're going down that individual journey and that business model that you're going into, all of a sudden COVID pops and it's like, hey, we're going to jab you with this vaccine that we're still trying to figure it all out, but just get it. So it kind of puts you in this weird dynamic of, okay, whoa. I'm going down this lane here with all of these things that I'm putting on my body, doing to my body on the daily basis in my beauty regimen. And then you want to poke me with shit, pal? Like, I don't know how that works, right? I could definitely see where that would be problematic. So now there was a big issue, I know, with a lot of the nurses that like there was potential job loss if you didn't kind of conform to this.
Not potential, that happened.
Really?
Yeah, I have a few friends that were terminated.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was get it or you're terminated. And there was no information around what that looked like. So, you know, when we talk about informed consent and how important that is, we didn't get that, unfortunately. We didn't get that with this vaccine, but we also didn't get that with the consequences of not getting it. So it was kind of like, okay, so if we get this, what are our long-term side effects? What are my short-term? Does it affect my fertility? Well, nobody could answer that. But then it was, doesn't matter, get it or you're fired. Okay, but if you terminate me, can I get EI? Do I get my benefits? Do I, you know, what happens to my pension? They would refuse to answer those questions for people. So nurses were put in this position, and I'm sure, I mean, other professions, I'm sure as well, where it was like, okay, so I take this and you're telling me that you have no idea what it possibly could do to me in the future. Or I don't, and I lose my profession that I've worked very hard for and I'm very passionate about, my career, my job, potentially my home. It's like, it was such a shitty position for them to put us in, especially with the science at the time. Like, if we're talking about the science now, I mean, that's very clear, right? It doesn't stop transmission. I just had COVID in June. Majority of the people that I work with have COVID, and some of them have had it 3 times. So,
3 times.
3 times.
Double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, quad vaxxed, all the vaxxed.
Right. Yes.
Wow.
So we know it doesn't stop transmission, and we knew that at the time. That's the thing. Like, I wrote emails. I wrote a lot of them. I wrote them to our union, our CEO. I mean, yeah, I went as high as I knew how to go to get some questions answered. And all I got in response was, we encourage you to get vaccinated. That's all. There was no answer to my questions. And so that was frustrating. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Before?
I don't know.
We were talking about forced vaccinations and how nurses were fired and compelled to either get vaccinated or be fired. Right.
So anyways, it was just a situation that I think we should have never been put into with the science that was available to us at the time. When they made these mandates, the science showed that it didn't stop transmission. And so they were never, ever, ever valid. And they still aren't today. And yet nurses are still terminated today. In BC, there was a news article that came out that there was 2,500 nurses laid off in BC, or terminated. I shouldn't say laid off, because they were terminated. They don't get anything. They cannot get EI.
So what do you think happens? What do you think happens over the next little while? Because again, those are all going to be employment lawsuits, right? Like, you're going to have absolutely. You're going to have employment class action lawsuits that come from this. They'll take 5 years to settle.
But it should be big wins, because it's like a slam dunk, really.
You would think.
You would think, right? You would totally think, which is to me why I don't understand why these authorities really haven't hired them back yet. Here we are drowning on the field. Like I worked on Sunday and I was 60% less staff. I can't do that. And we can't shut our doors. We keep taking kids and patients. So now we're working with 3 nurses to take care of 40, 50 kids. It's just like, how do you expect us to do this over and over and over again? And then this article comes out that there's 2,500 nurses just sitting at home that could be helping with this crisis. It's like, it's a no-brainer. You just hire them back. It's stupid at this point. I feel like it's ego at this point, you know, it's like, well, I can't admit that we were wrong. And that's not how we grow as humans. And that's not how we grow as a profession. And that's just not how we succeed, you know, especially in healthcare, a healthcare system that is quite literally drowning. I have never, ever, ever in my entire career thought about leaving my career until this past year. And I'm not the only one, you know, they did surveys. I think there was like 52% of nurses said that they plan on leaving the profession soon. That's huge when we're already short. I think like in BC alone, and I can't speak to Ontario, I know it's almost the same there, but we're short like a lot, tens of thousands of nurses at this point. I think the number actually was 26,000 or something by 2030 or something. So
what does your union say? Like when you go to them, like for instance, ONA here in Ontario, when, you know, they're supposed to be a voice. And this is something that James and I, when we talk, I am fairly anti-union in a lot of things. James tends to be a little bit more liberal in his viewpoints. I'm kind of like the fuck you conservative. So that's kind of how we play off each other. So like I look at a union and I go, the union that you pay every month for, that
they should be fighting for you.
Right. There should be advocating. They should be laying out what happens, why happening, all this sort of thing.
Yeah. They should have, before you even had made a choice whether or not you would quit or take the vaccine, they should have been there with you, beside you, going, okay, here are where your options are, not just lay it dry. And they're a powerful union. So I don't know about over there, but the one here in Ontario is a fairly powerful union. So it shocks me that wasn't a thing.
Yeah, me too.
So there's nothing.
There's not a lot to say about that. Like at the end of the day, I think I am disappointed in the lack of support that these nurses that have been terminated have received. I don't think that I don't think that they've received any, but again, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So I would like to think that maybe there are things happening. From conversations with people that I know. And here's, again, I need to make a statement here, because the 2,500 in this news article, I know more that have not reported yet and are still on different leaves and things. So that 2,500 number, I know for sure is more than that. But these people haven't necessarily received, I don't think, the support that they should have from our union. But this is where I'm a little different. I think you need to speak up for yourself. You can't rely on a union to fight your battle. Like, you need to, if you're somebody who's been terminated and you're pissed off about it, then why aren't you talking about it? Because this is not actually common knowledge. It's amazing how many people don't think that nurses were terminated. Not like terminated, no EI, no pet, like, people don't know that this has happened, but people don't know that this has happened because they've been quiet about it, you know? So if anything, I can say to anybody who's out there who is, you know, sitting at home going, I really wish I had my job back. Well, we need to be louder, and I will be loud with you. Like, we need to be loud and speak up, because you can't rely on someone else to do so for you.
I love it.
File those lawsuits. Like, I'm happy to.
Well, so there's like 2,700, you said. That's a huge protest.
2,500. That's a big number.
That's a huge protest that you could have. Like, that would be big. But you know what? Like, I was thinking, you went back, you were saying that you don't know why they won't bring back these nurses, and, you know, or maybe they're worried about, you know, saying they're wrong or apologizing. And it just struck me as odd, because here's Trudeau right at the front line saying, we're saying sorry to everybody. You know, we're saying sorry to the natives, we're saying sorry to everybody, which he should do. I'm not saying he shouldn't. But if you're on a mission to say sorry, I don't like Trudeau. If you're on a mission to say sorry and you're on a mission to make amends, if you're on a mission to make amends, why wouldn't you make amends with the people right now? Going back to make amends is great and it's important. But you did something now. Are you going to wait 30 years to say sorry about that? That's crazy. When I found out that, because I didn't know either, because I haven't heard about this. I knew before this moment, but it's been recently, like the last month, that I've heard that, you know, nurses were actually laid off. I heard about threat and then it disappeared. So I didn't think it happened. So that boggles my mind when I'm hearing that healthcare places are closing, hospitals are slowing down. I know nurses before, like my mom would be, so 1997 is when she passed away, and she was a nurse up until 1995, and she was overworked then, like highly overworked then, like just going nonstop her whole 12-hour shift. So to think what it would be like with only 3 on a floor, I can't even imagine. That would be insane, because I used to be a little kid, and back then, as a little kid, you could go and be with your mama behind the desk. And I remember how she never sat. Like, she never had time for me. Like, really, it was whatever nurse happened to be at the desk that took care of me. And but it was nonstop movement. It was wild, and it was all night. It was crazy. So to say that you can't say sorry, we made a mistake, come on back, when we're on a mission as a liberal government to do that, to make amends. That's what their mission is right now. That's what they keep saying. They're making amends to women, to natives, to Black people.
Right.
Why not make amends to the people right here and now?
He's making this apology tour on the history, and that he wasn't necessarily involved in that history, right? So him as a person, and now him as a person is the reason that we are in this mess that we are in, and his ego, I think, is just in his way.
Shannon, I think you're bang on. I think that's exactly it. It also, going out and apologizing also implies liability. I can tell you stories about people that I know within the Ontario Provincial Police. A guy that I know pretty well, he was actually hit by a drunk driver while on duty. Guy came in, hit him from the back, and he had an acquired brain injury. He was never right again. And he's had a lot of problems since, a lot of functional issues, a lot of anger issues, a lot of all kinds of things. And in that about 1.5 to 2 year period after his injury, he was doing all of the things that he was supposed to be doing. And they brought him in one day. He was counting paper clips in the detachment, and they said, so we're firing you today. And he's like, for what? And they're like, well, we just have nowhere to put you. Your platoon, we need the room. And he's like, well, what about like my family, like all this sort of thing? And they're like, dude, listen, you're going to sue us. It's going to take 10 to 12, maybe so years. You'll get millions of dollars. You'll get it eventually, but I got to get you off my roster today. And they fired him. And the thing that killed me about it was the guys that worked with him were silent. And it was that radio silence spoke volumes to me about a number of issues and a number of things in regards to that. And I think a lot of it comes back to this. I've got a good, cushy government job. I got a pension. I've got this security. I can't lose that. And this is something that James and I talk about all the time, is trying to build your own financial freedom, where you don't have to be dependent on that salary, that cushiness, that opportunity that somebody else is going to give you. And that, to be honest with you, I looked at that guy, and he was very fortunate because he did have some rental properties. He was able to kind of bounce a bit, but there's been so much fallout in his own personal life and his family life from that has just been, it's been devastating. And then the guys, that thin blue line of other officers that were supposed to be there for him, were just gone. It was
It sounds very familiar to what she's saying about the nurses, like,
right?
Because I haven't heard of it. Like, I don't know, maybe it's possible, because we know, like, we talk about this all the time, and I'm in firm agreement with you that the media is like not reporting some things. They're just flat out not reporting, or if they are reporting, they're reporting only partial facts. And it's a true story on both sides, on the conservative side and the liberal side of the media. But if that's not the case, and that, you know, the other nurses aren't saying anything, that's peculiar to me. I don't know.
What was more upsetting to me, I think, was that not only were they not saying anything, they were actually in full support of it. They were fully in support. Majority of nurses were fully in support of, like, you get the shot, or you deserve to be a nurse. Like, there was people writing. We have this Facebook group which is called Nurses Engaged, and we jokingly call it Nurses Enraged, because people are horrible on it. I had to get rid of it because I was like, this is awful. But on there, people were like bashing the union for saying, you know, we encourage you to get vaccinated, however, we, you know, don't agree with mandates. And they're like, fuck that union, they don't represent me, they should be supporting vaccinations. Like people were so terrible on this. And in person, they they fully supported these mandates. And that's the thing, is these mandates had a lot of public support because of things that happened on the media, I think. And
100%.
Yeah. And
so the vaccine stuff was a referendum on Trump. And if you wavered in any way, then you're, a boot Nazi with Trump if you don't think that this is the best way to go. And at the early stages of this, the media was literally saying that Donald Trump is killing people through COVID. Get the vaccine, do all this stuff. And it's like, well, what happened to, like, I don't know, civil liberties, personal choice, bodily autonomy, like any of these things?
I don't even I don't know why and where it became politicized. Like, politics should have completely stayed out of this. Like, they are, I don't know. Justin is a drama teacher. Like, let him stay in the,
I love
it. Business drama teacher. That's the favorite quote I've had all night. I love it.
It's true. It's like, why are we giving people of power all of a sudden the ability to tell us what we're supposed to do in science? Like, let's leave that to the scientists and the people that actually know what they're talking about. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I'm, again, probably on the wrong podcast in this sense, because I'm not really necessarily a political person. But until all of this is when I started to really understand and pay more attention to politics. And I didn't understand, like, I'm not even kidding, I did not really understand right wing, left wing. I didn't give it a thought. It didn't matter to me. And then with all of this drama with the vaccines, it was, you're right wing, you're left wing. I was like, okay, I have to learn a little bit more about this, because what am I? Like, I don't know what I am. So I don't know. I just don't understand why it ever became politicized. It should have never been that way. But I think that was also part of driving people to just get it, right? Like, once it was politicized and it was, you're a grandma killer if you don't get it. It was game over, and everybody played into that. And so once you have everybody kind of like on board with that, then it's hard to not go along with the grain. I personally think it's harder for you to stand up and be like, whoa, this doesn't make sense. When you're one of hundreds of thousands of people, it feels like, anyways, feels like you're the odd one out, going, well, we need to take a pause, we need to think about this a little bit more. When everyone's like, no, you need to get it or you're a grandma killer. Well, you're gonna probably get it if you're somebody who just likes to
go along to get along.
You either really fully believe in it, and that's, or you're pressured by society. And I don't think that that's the fault of anybody. As I think a lot of us are pressured by society every single day. But
in your experience, though, did you find that, like, I'm going to take the nursing angle out of this. Now I'm going to go to, like, your friend circle. And I've talked about this before, is that people that I know that ended up getting vaccinated, I would say that there's probably like 1% of the people that I know went and got vaccinated because of a concern around COVID and their life being threatened by it. The people that I knew ended up getting it because they wanted to travel. They wanted to head down to the Dominican in the winter. They wanted to go see their friend in Tucson. It was 12th on the list of things that, like, I'm concerned about my own personal health. Have you had similar experiences, or?
Yeah, for sure. I that's the majority of people, I think, or they were worried about people's health. Like if your dad was unwell and they said you had to get it because you could kill your dad. Well, that's gonna obviously make people get it more, I think. But a majority of people either did it for someone else or to travel and just have a normal life and go to restaurants. One person I know said, I did it because I needed to go to my yoga. Oh my gosh, like, what? Okay, priorities, it's fine.
And I look at those situations, and I've had these conversations where when COVID first started, and we were talking about the flattening of the curve, right, in the 2 weeks, right, I had conversations with people in this area, friends of mine from high school, like years of friendships, and a few of them were nurses, a few of them were cops, a few of them are other professions and that sort of thing, and they're like, literally, Pat, like, you need to shut your mouth because you're gonna kill people. And I'm like, what? Like, there's no dialogue. There's no, like, what do you think about this? Because my viewpoint was, like, we are not doing the right thing here, like, financially. And this was just shutting down for 2 weeks. like shutting down for 2 weeks is a really bad idea because it's going to lead to bigger stuff. When we show that we're going to shut down once, well, I don't know, what are we on, third or fourth now that we've had? And that was the issue. And I literally have like lost friendships because of it. And it,
I'm sure.
Wild. To me, it was just wild. And that's, I know that everything that you disagree with is a Nazi and all those sorts of things, but like those people pretty quickly were kind of like, if I was a Jew, I feel like they'd be like, he's in the barn, right? Like it felt like that happened fuck, really quick, right?
Yeah, so, I think you're absolutely right. I think that did happen. Like I was leaning towards vaccines because, I was the stuff that I read and the stuff, and I was so old now. And the stuff that I read and the stuff that I do, like I work with children and stuff like that. And I knew children weren't affected, but some of the teachers that I work with could have been affected because they were, at the time, some of them were vulnerable and stuff like that. And some of the places that I work, there's vulnerable people. So I was all for the vaccines. I had no problem with it, but I also had no problem with someone saying no. And it really confused me that I am still confused. No one's ever been able to explain the fact that I have the vaccine and someone else doesn't. Why am I under threat? I thought the whole point was that I have the vaccine, I'm safe. So why do I care if they don't have it? And if my grandma has it, then aren't they safe?
Right. And this was my biggest, like I had such a hard time during all of this in my career because I heard other nurses saying things like that. Oh, if that person isn't vaccinated, they don't deserve a bed. They don't deserve to live. We shouldn't even give them oxygen. Like these conversations were actually being had. And that just like ripped at my soul because I thought, no, this isn't the profession that I'm in. Like we are supposed to care for people regardless of their personal thoughts, beliefs, or habits. I mean, the same could be said for the number of people that get dropped off at our door coding because they overdose on drugs. Like, do they not deserve Narcan? Like, we don't agree with the fact that they're doing heroin, but do they not deserve to live? Like, I don't know how that's different than somebody who chose to not get a vaccine or did. And I'm with you. Like, I never understood the whole I never understood turning on someone because of their personal choices. We've never done that. We've never done that. And in the medical field, like we know better.
I feel like that pulled behind the curtain. You know how like the old saying is that like you get a look behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. You see that it's just a guy with a machine. And like the people that I knew in my life that were like that, I can't look at them the same. Like I know what's behind your curtain now, brother.
Yeah.
Like you, when it comes down to it, when somebody in authority comes to you and says that, you're gonna do it. Like you don't give any second thought. You don't care about anyone else. Your viewpoint is the be all end all. And like we talk a lot about, narcissists in our society. That to me is like the epitome of narcissism, where you cannot put anything past your own viewpoint, understanding somebody else, like dangerous personalities.
And the funny thing is, go ahead.
I think that comes back down to when we talked about like when you know better, you do better. I think, and I had to make a bit of a shift myself because I had the exact same thoughts and feelings and towards people. And I thought like, I can never look at you again. I can never be your friend again. I don't like how you're treating people or talking about people, but I had to remind myself, and I think this is where I did a little bit of a mind shift, is I have to give people grace because they are operating in fear. And so I had to remind myself that everybody's operating in fear, whether you are for the vaccine or not, you're operating in fear, right? Because you don't want to get it because you're fearful of what it could do to you. You do want to get it because you're fearful of what COVID could do to you. Right. It goes both ways. So when you think about it that way, you think about, okay, someone who's like, you're not getting it and you're going to kill me. They really think that you could kill them because they're operating in fear. So when you remember and you start thinking about other people and how their response to this has been, remind yourself that like, okay, their response has been the response in fear. Not that it's right, but it helps you kind of put things into a different perspective to be like, okay, you know what? I don't hate you. I just hate your response to fear.
You know what? That's an incredibly go ahead. Sorry.
But at the end of the day, it was the funny thing is I often talk about how people will argue about things, and they're always arguing about things that aren't really what the problem is. What the problem was is both sides were afraid of death.
Right.
And that was a commonality. And we could have, like we talk about that all the time, if we could just have a discussion. Don't shout me down, don't call me a Nazi, don't say that I'm evil. Let's take a moment, take a breath. What's the hurry? Let's take a week and let's discuss this and figure this out. Because both sides are dangerous. Not taking the vaccine, dangerous. Taking the vaccine, dangerous. So let's talk it out. That's the liberal way, as far as I was concerned.
Right.
That's the liberal way.
So too.
And it turned into not the liberal way very quick. I think that's Justin Trudeau's problem. I think it falls solely on his shoulders, really, because he just came out and made no decisions at all. He was the worst leader in this. Like, I leaned towards Doug Ford. I thought he was a great leader, and I'm not a conservative at all, but I'd vote for him in a second. I know he's going to cut us and ruin healthcare and education for like 4 years, but he came out every time with a plan, and it was a solid plan. I didn't agree with the plan every time, but it was a plan that made people not afraid, and that changed people's lives. I think Ontario did better in the fear factor because we had a leader that was leading, as opposed to a leader that came out and said, I have 10 things that we're going to do, and we'll let you know when we're going to do them. And then came out and said, everyone has to have a vaccine. You know, like, it was just crazy talk and not informing anything about anyone. And the whole point of liberal is informed opinion. They scream it at the rooftops. Informed opinion, informed choice. My identity is important. My life is important. You should recognize me. But no, I'm sorry, you don't get a choice in this. Go do it. Like, it boggled my mind when it came down to that. I was all for the vaccine, like I said. I thought we should have it, but I'm not angry at someone who didn't have it. And I was confused by all these liberals, like some of their friends, that I'm like, yeah, but they get a choice. And they were like, no, they don't. I'm like, but grandma has a vaccine.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What's the problem? I come back to that, but it became political. But the funny thing is that the conservatives were more liberal than the liberals. It was the weirdest thing. It was like a flip in this one instance, and it confused me.
Where do you? Sorry, go ahead.
I actually thought, I was like, I have always, voted liberal. I always thought I was the liberal. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not a very. Stop it. Stop with the head shake.
There's something wrong with you.
But, I'm not very versed in politics. I've told you that before, but I voted and I did a little bit of, and I always sided more on the liberal until all of this. And then when there was the whole, you don't get a choice. Like, I'm like, wait, maybe I need to reevaluate. Like, what am I? I feel like I'm nothing. I'm a neither. I'm like in the middle. But it's interesting. You say like conservatives became more liberal. I started agreeing more with conservatives than liberals, and I wasn't agreeing with a lot of the things that Justin's been doing or any of the liberals have been doing. And that's when I went, okay, maybe I need to like look a little bit deeper into politics. And that's what I was saying earlier. Is the first year that I actually did that because of the controversy between it all, I guess.
Well, that was for myself.
I think a lot of liberals my age are feeling the same way, because we're all kind of old school liberals that believe in freedom of speech, freedom of choice, that kind of thing, and really do see this as, whoa, wait a second. Like, these are liberties that we always fight for. And I get it was pandemic. I get it was scary. I get there were a lot of things, but taking away our choice and even the ability to talk about it, that boggled my mind. You can't talk about it? What do you mean you can't talk about it? You should be able to talk about anything you want. That's why we live in Canada. And you're saying we can't talk about it? That was also another thing. I'm like, freedom of speech is really important to me. And you're cutting off all freedom of speech, especially when it goes dark. They cut me off. It's the FBI, boys. They're coming for me.
Well, but like watching the social media stuff, that was a question, that I was going to ask you about as well, Shannon, is some of your social media stuff and how you've gotten into that. Watching watching posts, everything being kind of taken down, watching the censorship that started, those sorts of things. Like, where do you see that going from here?
Gosh, honestly, I try not to think about it a whole lot because it is a little crazy to me, but I have certainly noticed it in my own, like Instagram, for example, as the predominant platform that I'll use for Beauty Counter.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I would get like, and this sounds maybe stupid to many people, but I would get like hundreds of views on my stories. And then there was a period of time where I was posting things about COVID or controversial things, I guess, that people certainly did not like. And all of a sudden, like, I would get 50 views. Like, we went from hundreds to 50, and it like lasted a week. It wasn't just like a day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I kind of would lay off the posts and I'd see, and sure enough, they'd slowly creep a little bit back up. And then, you know, if I did it again, it would happen again. And I'm like, this is fascinating because they say that this isn't happening. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not, by no means do I have a lot of like followers. I'm not an influencer, but I noticed it. So I can only imagine these people with hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers who make this their like sole income, or I can understand why they didn't want to talk out about it, because all of a sudden now they're being like, their views are going down, and that means their sales are going down, and that means that they're in the same situation that we were in. So now you're losing money and potentially your home to speak out about something.
That's right.
Even on social media, which should be a free platform.
Right.
But
so how do we break that? Like, that's the scary thing to me, is that when your ability to put hand to mouth and feed yourself is controlled by the government, and James and I, we argue about this all the time. If it's controlled by the government or is directed by the government or other big tech entities that are playing to the government, like the CBC, when they get, 40, I can't even remember the exact numbers. I want to say it's like $400 million they get a year, or sorry, over a number of years for funding the CBC.
Yeah.
Well, they're not an unbiased media platform anymore, right? So when you're handing them a check for hundreds of millions of dollars, they lose some of their journalistic integrity to me. And that's where, when every home in the nation was turned to CBC to find out what was going to kill us this week, right? Because I don't know, what are we on, like the 15th thing? I'm 35 years old. We're on
We've
had terrorism. We've had SARS. We've had pandemics. But I think we're on to monkey something now. Like we're fucked. Everything's
I think the 24-hour news cycle has made such a huge difference because they have to be always talking about news. And so they drum and they find every shred of detail, and they're throwing out content before they have answers. And then when they no longer, it used to be like when I was a kid, like Walter Cronkite or something would say something wrong after lots of research, but he made a mistake. He would come out and say, I made a mistake. That never happens, because by tomorrow, everyone's forgotten by what they said. And you're absolutely right. They are very biased. So is Fox News. So are all of them.
Sure.
And it's frustrating because a lot of people only get information from one side. And if you only get information from one side, you're not getting the full story. Not at all, because none of them are unbiased now. There is no news media that's unbiased. And even scarier now, I know people who get it from Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. This is their news. So some guy like us, they watch us and they go, you wouldn't believe, I know for a fact that this happened. It's like, well, no, you don't know for a fact. I haven't researched it. We're just two guys talking about stuff. But they come out with it like it's like a factual thing without researching it, and it's scary.
But I also, on the flip side of that, is that when you sit and you watch a clip, and James and I, we argue all the time, Shannon, about like what is coming next. And I've got a lot of concerns, and I always tell them that I'm putting on my little tin hat here. And like I look at, the Great Reset, and I'm looking at the financials, and I look at it and I go, ooh, Like there's a lot of shit that's already come down the pipe here. And he's like, it's just a book, man. And I go, no, I know, but like we're on chapter 4. Like we're really kind of getting into the book a little farther than I really want to. And it's just like, where do we go now? Like the next number of years, I've got a daughter. I know you've got nieces and nephews and all that sort of thing. You have family where it's like putting hand to mouth and feeding ourselves truly over the next, 5 to 10 years around the world could get kind of scary on us. And we're kind of standing back and going like, you're bad and I'm bad and who's bad? Like it feels like we're bogged down in bullshit. So, but
I think that's like, if we're to circle back, I think that the idea of starting a side business or a side hustle or a second or third source of income becomes so much more important in today's time. Like our inflation rates are huge and our gas is high, and it's not going to get lower, unfortunately, anytime soon. And so people are struggling to feed their families and put gas in their car. And so, you can't necessarily rely. I mean, COVID showed us that people lost jobs. My mom is a waitress, and so she was hit hard. She didn't work for a long time. Yeah. And though CERB helped, now she owes $5,000 in taxes. I don't know how, because she's
wow.
Yeah. So, people are struggling. And so I think we have to start thinking outside of the box. Is like, how I have a government job. Are there any jobs, out there that maybe can help me supplement, or maybe, help provide food or the excess money that we're needing in terms of inflation? Like, what was the number? I think the average families need something like $5,200 extra a year to live the way that they were last year due to inflation. So where are you going to get that $5,200 from? Or are you just going to make cuts? Like, who wants to make cuts? We want to all live the same. I want the good wine, So so a side business really does help. And I think majority of people need to start thinking outside the box of, how do I have a second, third, fourth or source of income? Because one isn't enough.
I could not agree more. And that's, to be honest with you, Shannon, that's really the crux of what we do here with Soaring Profits, is the fact that I talk a ton about being financially independent. So I have my real estate properties. I have my investing. I walk people through how to read and trade the market in ways that are super easy, yet super reliable, right? I'm not talking about, like, I've had some pretty good days where I've taken some good money off the table, but I've also had days where you sit there and you're like, it's $200. And it's like, I can do that from my office. It's program it, set it, forget it, never touch it again. And it's like residual income every day. Boom, 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 boom. It's pumping money. And this is where I think that people, they get bogged down in their own personal bullshit where they're like, I can't do that. I'm afraid to do that. What if I fail? What if something? And I'm at the point, and James, man, like, if you, like, from where James in his personal kind of endeavor and journey to where he is now, 160 pounds, a complete 180, like, you're killing it, man. And a lot of this stuff was just a mind change for James. And it was like, I'm going to go do it. And now he's the guy that's like the brainchild behind, this podcast where we get literally like tens of people to watch like tens, right? But no, he's so motivated, and he's doing, like, the guy's now going whitewater rafting. If you were to say 5 years ago to this guy, he'd be like, I can't fit in the boat, right? Like, it's just such a huge disconnect, right? So
yeah, I'd be too embarrassed. Like, I was so big that I couldn't take my kids to, I took my kids to Wonderland, but I would put them on the roller coaster because I was too fat to get in it. Like, literally, they couldn't do up the seatbelt around my belly. I was that fat, that embarrassed. And now I'm just driven, and I look for, I've met Pat, because Pat's amazing. You know that. And he taught me how to, like, split up my house so I can make money from my house without doing very little. Like, there was a lot of upfront costs, but now I'm soaring profits. And, and then, other things like how to invest my money and stuff like that. The stuff that I've learned from it is amazing, and I love it. And you're absolutely right. So, like, I have my income from my property. I have 2 full-time jobs. And now I have a pretty good income coming in. Well, not at this moment, but I normally have a pretty good income coming in from the market because of, what Pat's taught me. And it's because I don't know how to stop anymore because I'm driven. I want my kids to have a platform. We talk about this all the time. I want my kids to have a platform to jump off of. You can't hear me anymore.
No, we can hear you. You're good.
Oh, okay. I stopped moving or you stopped moving. So like, you're absolutely right. If you don't have multiple sources of income in this day and age, if you're going to sit there and whine, woe is me, life's hard, life's tough. I'm telling you right now, it is tough. It is hard. But if you go out there and like I talk to people who say I can't find a job, and I'm like, okay, well, how many businesses did you go to today? Well, no, I went online and I put out resumes. Well,
Right.
I'm like, how many businesses have you walked into and said, I want to talk to the manager. Hey, Bill, how you doing? I'm James. I'm very skilled. That's how I got my first job. I was on welfare at a school. 2 months of welfare. It was the worst 2 months of my life. I thought I was a failure. Back then, you had to go in to get the welfare check, so you went in line and all that, and I felt disgusted. Not that it's disgusting to be on welfare. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I self-loathed myself because it was like I gave up. Every day for that 2 months, I went from business to business to business until I finally tracked down this man on the front lawn of one of his properties. And I said, hey, I am James. And it took me forever to find him, but I found him and I said, hi, I'm James. And I know you don't know who I am, but I am so determined to work for you that I found you, and you know how hard it is to find you. And this is what I can do for you. And I need a job more than I can say because I have a family to start. And he hired me basically on the spot. And that's what you need to do. You need
and
to
James
like,
had
think
like
that
a
art
really
has been lost.
and James made a really wonderful career in gay porn for a long time.
Gay porn. Yeah, that's what it was. Totally. Yeah, it was wonderful.
What a dick, eh?
You always knew.
Shannon, we're about that time in the night. I want to thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much. Oh, there he is. He's back. I want to thank you for coming. How can people reach out to you if they want to reach out to you and chat with you about some of your beauty line that you have, Beauty Counter, and maybe talk to you about some of your products and some of the things that you offer? How's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably social media. If you have Instagram, that's probably the best place. So it's at ShanJohn16. That's my Instagram handle, if you will. Perfect. Or my email, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's just my first name, Shannon JohnsonRN@gmail.com.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
James, how do we get in touch with you? We can't hear me anymore. I think he's gone.
It's frozen.
Anyway. Yeah. So Shannon, at the end of this, I don't know if James can still hear us, if he can do this. At the end of this, every time we have a conversation with somebody and bring them on our lives, I have a little slogan that I say. James has got a little slogan that he says, and then we put you on the spot and you've got to come up with something cute. Okay. We don't tell anybody we're doing it. We just do it. So mine is, again, thank you, folks. I appreciate you guys coming by. Like, subscribe, and share, and let's make some money together. James.
Let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls. If you can still hear me.
Yeah, nailed it. And Shannon, you're up.